Hello and welcome to Zero Point One Done with me, Gaurav Rastogi. Every episode, I invite peak professionals and we try to understand their system. I started Zero Point Done because we're very fascinated with peak professionals. We want to emulate the excellence that we see in people. And there's a lot of advice available on the internet, but very little bit of that advice translates into actual personal change a lot of times because these examples, these stories are far removed from us. And so with these conversations, I'm hoping to bring in peak professionals and learn from them firsthand. And we're doing this in a LinkedIn, in a live event so that we're able to learn together. Today, my guest is Shankar Maruwada. Now, Shankar is the co founder and CEO of EkStep Foundation. He was previously with the UIDAI, which implemented Aadhaar in India's extremely successful national biometric program, biometric identification program. You might already have your Aadhaar. It has more than a billion users and has been the foundation for India's digital revolution. He was, in fact, responsible for naming it Aadhaar as the head of demand generation and marketing. But there's even more to Shankar. He pioneered data analytics in India through Marketics, which is a company he co founded. He's also an investor in startup and a mentor to many entrepreneurs. Shankar is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Now, Shankar, I'd like to bring you on board. Shankar, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you, Gaurav. Always a pleasure to have a chat with you.
Thank you. So, Shankar, tell us the major beats of your life so far. How are you here? How did you get here?
Yeah, I am the standard middle class family. I was good in academics, so managed to get into IIT, and from there uh, I got into IIM Ahmedabad, where you and I were together. And after that, I got my dream job, which was Procter and Gamble, and in brand management or marketing. I loved that job. After 4 years, pretty much almost overnight, I quit that to do a startup around the time of the original internet boom. And the first company went bust when the internet boom went bust. But we picked up the pieces and started a second company called Marketics that was into marketing analytics. That did incredibly well. And we, the co founders, sold out in 2007 at the height of the economic boom and just before the economic bust that happened. After that, after hanging loose for a year and doing whatever rich retired guys do, a serendipitous meeting with Nandan Nilekani led me to volunteering for the UIDAI program, later known as Aadhaar, and was part of a very exciting and transformational journey. And after that, in 2015, Nandan Nilekani, Rohini Nilekani, and I started EkStep Foundation, and that's where we are now. So, corporate to entrepreneurial to government to now the development sector. In between, yeah, I also, for a couple of years, ran Nandan's, the logistics for Nandan's general election campaign over 2013-14. So uh, that's me.
That's amazing. What I'm fascinated with your story, Shankar, is that everything you've described seems like a peak to me. If to any other guy, you went to IIM Ahmedabad, you went to IIT Kharagpur, already peak experiences. Then you joined PNG before campus. I hasten to add, and so now also another peak. And just when you think the guy has peaked, you go off and do something else, and then you reach another peak, and then you go off and do something else. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's begin at the top. You were already well traveled before you joined PNG, right?
Yeah, actually, where I'm currently based, Bangalore, is the seventh state of India I'm in, and born and brought up in Northeast, Southwest, six different states, which gave me a flavor of the diversity of India. I can speak or understand seven, eight languages. So that allowed me to appreciate uh, and embrace change much more naturally than maybe someone who's grown up in one place.
Hmm. Now, PNG is obviously a great career. And when we were talking, you talked about how PNG is a very mission driven enterprise. Talk more about that.
Yeah, PNG now being, I think, a 160-year-old organization and a large global multinational, everybody, every journey was drilled with the purpose, values, and principles of PNG. Right, a sense of a purpose. There's a much larger purpose that we are all that unites all of us, and the culture that I saw, right, that adherence to purpose, values, and principles is something that has stayed with me long since. Even when I did my startup Marketics, or even now at EkStep Foundation, or even at UIDI, I took relevant elements of those, specifically creating a very purposeful destination that is inspiring, that unites a diverse group of individuals to come together to overcome their differences and work towards a larger goal, and the larger goal being much, much bigger than any one of us. So, yeah, PNG taught me that valuable life lesson.
And so, in from PNG, when you did your own startup, how did you establish your own mission and purpose for that team?
Yeah. So, 2002, when we started Marketics, the pretty much the first thing we wrote was a sense of this mission, and we wrote a mission that would appeal to our heads and hearts. So we wrote that we would be the world's best professionals at what we do, and in doing so, we will have globally delighted clients. And we added a line that appealed to us. In the process, we will have fun and get rich. So, best professionals in the world, globally delighted clients, have fun, get rich. And I know many youngsters joined us for that mission statement. If somebody could be this honest yet inspiring, these can't be bad guys to work with. And there have been, like in my PNG example, there were moments in Marketics where we made specific strategic or tactical choices in line with that mission, that destination.
Interesting. So, talk about Marketics. You started out an analytics company, but you have no experience in being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, or of analytics, by the way. So yes, I had no experience of being an entrepreneur. Again, it started serendipitously when I was helping our batchmates, Shailendra Malani and Samir Parekh, who were thinking of a startup. So I was brainstorming with them because they wanted some marketing advice. So that startup did not happen. But when Shailendra Malani was thinking of another startup, he called me, and then we became co-founders there. The other interesting trigger was as Malani was asking me about wanting to join him, I'd just about gotten married. So it was during the early days of marriage that suddenly I had this vision. Actually, I was lying down and staring at the blank sky at night somewhere in Rajasthan. That I had this looking up at the sky, and my future played out in front of me. Procter and Gamble, successful executive promotion, you do more and more of it, and then you retire. And when your grandchildren ask, Granddad, there was this fabulous internet revolution at that time, what were you doing? My answer would have been, I was selling soap. So that dissonance played out, and pretty much within a month, an evangelizer of PNG and its culture and its uh, career, pretty much in a month quit and jumped into the world of startups.
That's interesting. Talk about the Aadhaar journey briefly now. Uh, so you met Nandan at a chance event. Then what happened?
Yeah, so but then I was hanging loose, investing in startups and mentoring entrepreneurs. I had fun doing that. But I bumped into Nandan at a charity event where I'd not met him before. So we just talking serendipitously outside because it was raining. We were the earliest to come, Bangalore traffic, and we had gotten a bit wet. So just socially chatting. And then he was curious about what I do. Obviously, I knew him. And so when I told him, he said that, no, 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 you are too young to be retired. I have a very interesting project, which is a social project that you might want to help out. Contact me in a month. And a few weeks later came the news that he was quitting Infosys to chair UIDAI. And then when I met him, he said, yeah, that was the project. And I was part of the founding team at UIDI. And my responsibility was twofold. One, to create an analytics unit and model the Aadhaar enrollment. And the main one being how do you create demand for 1.25 billion Indians to voluntarily go and give their data to get one more identity. So, yeah, sounds good. Both sound impossible. So, why don't I take it up?
The rest, I suppose, is history. All right. So I'll come back to the Aadhaar experience in more detail. And now it's 2014. You've successfully launched Aadhaar. Then you start EkStep Foundation. Talk a little about EkStep Foundation now.
Yeah. So, uh, after Nandan's unsuccessful attempt at standing for general elections, we again got together and we were wondering what now. And that's when Rohini came up with a suggestion that if you guys could use your brains to solve India's education problem, that would be well worth it. So we took a few months to understand what specifically were the problems in education, who were the other players, what were they doing, and a lot of players are doing a lot of wonderful things, and where could we add unique value. And in around early 2015, we were convinced and we set up the EkStep mission of reaching 200 million children by 2020 to improve their access to learning opportunities. And that attracted a bunch of the ex-Aadhaar folks and a small but committed team. And we've been on that journey since then.
Okay. Now let's double click on that. Last weekend, Shankar, I was at an event that your team hosted, the EkStep team hosted, and this was a full conference room filled with extremely excited people in Delhi. You're based in Bangalore, and all streams of life. These were politicians and bureaucrats and nonprofit organization people and techies, and a lot of excitement in the room. But what united them, to my fascination, was this vision for reaching a billion plus people, and the excitement in the room was palpable. And I want to get into that. How did you get to a point where you're now, through your ICSA Foundation, you and Nandan and Rohini, you're now inspiring people to think of a billion people, not just the 2,000 people in my neighborhood. How did that come to be? What is the scale all about?
So, having achieved a kind of a near impossible mission of reaching a billion plus with Aadhaar, we were a bit confident in a kind of a playbook we had. That playbook we refined and applied it in education for EkStep. And as we refined that playbook, now that playbook is kind of known as the digital public infrastructure playbook, and it's very popular. It's gone to sectors beyond. What we felt was some of our core beliefs. When the problem is at the size of a billion, it needs to be solved at that scale because that's the scale of the problem. That scale brings complexity. And that complexity is a large part because multiple sections of society, as Rohini calls them, the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, each is in itself an ecosystem of ecosystems, all independent agents. All of them have to come together to even have a shot at solving for the billion. Not only diverse actors, but diverse resources, funds, technology, content, policy, infrastructure have to come together. We also have to solve the dichotomy of inclusion because you want to reach a billion plus, and innovation because there is no one size fits all solution. There is no permanent solution. So, evolution or change and innovation that is created by the evolution and change. That's all of these have to come together. But as you can imagine, each pillar of society is busy doing its own thing. It has its specifically designed boundaries. So we felt that Delhi as a seat of government was a good place to get everyone together. So loosely, Bangalore is the seat of innovation, Delhi is the seat of government and governance, right? So in a sense, what happens when inclusion,
Hmm.
symbolized by Delhi, meets innovation, symbolized by Bangalore? That was the larger idea. And we called it People Plus because any solution for a billion plus has to start with people at the front and center. So people are not the last mile of solutioning, people are the first mile from which we work backwards, and collaboratively we can create solutions that work at the scale of a billion, that are sustainable, and that impact the billion plus people. And we believe that our thinking that we've kind of been testing, refining over a decade plus is applicable across sectors, not just in education, identity, etc. And that's why we felt having an open conversation, which is always a good first step to any deep collaboration. And that's why we had the Delhi event. So for us, Gaurav, the Delhi event was just a natural extension of who we are, how we work, and why we do what we do.
Very interesting. Now, you've taken a clearly a large number, a very audacious, bold goal of a billion people here. And previously, you said you took a goal of 200 million learners, children that you want to reach. These are huge numbers. They're very scary, they're audacious, and initially, I suppose, extremely impossible sounding, at least to us from outside. Why begin with that? The reason I'm asking you this question is I've seen this in peak professionals where you're taking on a goal that seems impossible, but you get it out of yourself, right? Why not begin with who you are and do your best?
It's a great question, Gaurav. Uh, I guess at some level, it's the team that one works with. In Marketics, it was my co-founders. At PNG, it was my other fellow colleagues. At UIDAI, definitely Nandan Nilekani and his inspiring leadership. At EkStep Foundation, Nandan, Rohini, my fellow leaders. First is acknowledging that the problem is at that scale, as I mentioned. Second is giving ourselves the power to be able to dream big. And as professionals from some of the best institutions and blessed with a lot of resources, if we don't, then who will? If we don't do it now, then when? If you don't do it together, then how? So, in a sense, setting that impossible destination is also acknowledging a bunch of things. That number one, we alone won't be sufficient to reach that goal. You need an entire ecosystem. Two, that journey itself will transform us and be prepared for the transformation. Three, a sense that we may not have all the answers, we may not even have all the questions, but the journey, the collaboration with others in the ecosystem, developing a compass of are we going the right direction, but most importantly, believing it can be done and spreading that belief among others within the organization and to the partnering organization and beyond to the larger ecosystem. 14 years ago, nobody believed we could achieve Aadhaar because then the world's largest biometric system took 60 years to build and it was one tenth of what we were doing. Now, in hindsight, we crossed that in 2 years, but at that point, you need to have a level of self delusion, right? That I believe I can do it and be able to infect or inject others with that belief. But
Right.
it is a larger collaboration with the ecosystem and comfort in that the journey will show me the path rather than the path will allow me to traverse the journey. Uh, that's been some of our experiences. Nothing easy about it, but it's definitely replicable.
But why begin with a billion? Why not begin with something more achievable and then calibrate upward?
And as Nandan likes to say, whether you want to reach 2 million, 20 million, or 200 million children, the thinking is the same. So when you're thinking and imagining, why not start with 200 million children out of the 250 then, or a billion plus? Also, on a more serious note, societal transformation, if it is not above a particular scale, crumbles after the people leave. It's only when the transformation has taken deep roots, the transformation has spread wide, that it becomes independent of the people who started the transformation. We are not there in Aadhaar anymore. We left long time ago, but it's flourishing, right? Uh, Similarly, a bunch of other stuff that we created has reached a scale where there are others who will take it forward. So, for lasting impact, for the impact to be at scale, I believe that an inspiring destination well above what we can do, right? As I like to joke, the choice is, does your destiny trap you into a lower destination, or can a much higher destination help you redefine your destiny? I believe the latter. The worst case, you will not succeed.
Talk more about this destiny, I think. So I am who I am. Is that my destiny?
Yeah, I am who I am. The resources available to me are what they are. How can I think much bigger? How can I think beyond my means? But hidden there is a fallacy that when I think big, it is I who has to achieve that,
Hmm.
right? And when you get over that fallacy and say that that is the destination, I will begin the journey, I will get fellow travelers, and I'll use our combined resources to get over the scarcity mindset, to get over the fixed mindset that I am who I am, my resources are given what they are. It's also a sense of my power comes from what I control, the destiny mindset, versus my power comes from what I believe, my power comes from what I inspire others. My power comes from how I can influence others.
Let's talk about belief. Is there a way you can bring this, step by step into life where, for example, at Aadhaar, you have to convince yourself that this is what we're doing, and then you have to convince other people that this is what we're doing, and then you have to make it happen. How do you convince yourself that this is something that can happen?
Yeah, great question. So I think it begins with the leader. At UIDAI, Nandan Nilekani was the leader. He had set this goal. We bought into it. And therefore, all of us set appropriately audacious goals to reach that larger goal. It's the leader who makes the team feel safe.
Hmm.
And at EkStep Foundation, it's my job to make the team feel safe. At Marketics, it was the job of my co founders and myself to make the team feel safe. At EkStep Foundation, both Nandan and Rohini, they also encourage to dream big, right? Because the worst that can happen is we will not reach it. Of course, one has to manage the practical day to day thing that don't set crazy goals every month because some of these are very long distance goals. It takes 3 to 5 years. So the 200 million goal or the at EkStep or the billion goal at UIDI were 5 year goals. And to some part at EkStep having achieved the 200 million, they are now thinking out in 2030 and creating a vision of what life should be in 2030. We may not achieve all the goals between now and 2030, but setting a crazy goal, an ambitious goal, does not mean you are absolved of the rigor of day to day planning, doing, collaborating, hitting your monthly, quarterly uh, goals, small steps that you do have to take those daily small steps. That's why we called ourselves EkStep. The journey of 1,000 steps starts with one step and a second and a third.
Very fascinating. So you have this audacious goal that you believe in. You've got a bunch of people. You talk about. I like the fact that you're saying it's not me alone. There's a whole ecosystem that is working together, so we can together get to it. Now, can you talk about when you get into a project that's completely new and uncharted? How do you develop a sense for what's right? And do you get into blind spots or wrong corners and then decide, okay, this won't help me get to this vision. What else can I try? How does that work?
Yeah. One thing before I answer that on the previous point, Gaurav, is that when you set a high goal, others in the ecosystem start thinking that goal is relevant to me too.
Hmm.
So part of your goal is taken on by others. So, for example, in Delhi last week, when we had the billion plus event, a lot of participants walked out with, hey, we got a lot of ideas. We saw a lot of possibilities. We got a lot of opportunities to connect with others, right? And in a sense, we created a space.
Hmm.
So setting that large destination creates a space for the ecosystem to come together and converse.
Interesting.
Uh, coming, what was the question again, Gaurav?
So you have this goal, and now you're going through a series of attempts at it. Do they all succeed? Do they all fail? How
Oh,
do you
yes,
adjust
yes,
the
yes,
goal, or do you adjust the path?
yes, yes. So in a sense, it's a process of sensing, right? And call it an entrepreneur's instinct or been around some time. But what works for us is talking to the existing people in the ecosystem, sharing your hypothesis of this is how I'm thinking, this is how I'm designing, and getting honest and brutal feedback which refines your design. So, as I like to state, one of the secrets of any good entrepreneur is having strong beliefs but weakly held. You
Say that
believe
again.
something in it, so you believe something in it very strongly, passionately, right? Because you're an entrepreneur. How can you be wrong? But when you realize that data, something doesn't go your way, you realize that, oh, that doesn't make sense. So you junk that strong belief because it's not an ideology, it's just a strong belief weakly held. I think I should go north. I am going north. I see a tiger, right? You know what? On second thoughts, I'm going to go west, right? Because your idea, your goal is not to go north. Your destination lies north. So you can shift, go somewhere, retreat, go back, and keep going. So there are a lot of examples in both UIDI but EkStep recently, where we started with a specific idea that we will do this wonderful app, then that will be very engaging. We realized that that's not going to work, even though the app was very good, it was very engaging. The reason we junked it was that app won't take us to 200 million because the cost of getting everyone to use that app would have been prohibitive and take long time. So then we said, okay, not our app, let's create a platform where not just our content, anybody's content can come in. That we went certain distance, but that also we realized that when that platform is scaled to the level of 200 million children, suddenly as a not-for-profit, we would end up having the data of 200 million children. And as a not-for-profit, that's not good for us or for society. So we said no to that also. When we developed open source technology, and that technology called Sunbird powered the government of India's platform called Diksha. And Diksha in turn offered that platform as a service to many states and boards who then uploaded their own content, their own curricula, and it reached their own students. So every state had its own mini platform. So this was a constant. In a sense, that's how we pretty much ended up reaching close to 200 million by 2020. But this was a journey of at every point you have you have a solution. The test of will this solution A take me to 200 million and B if it takes me to 200 billion, is that destination sounding all right with this approach? And both of these were our equivalent of our compasses for deciding whether are we on the right path or do we change our path. There were at least two occasions where a lot of investments we had done, which would have been very well justified to continue if we were chasing 2 million number, we had to abandon because 2 million would just have been 1% of our goal.
Hmm. That's a great example of strong beliefs but weakly held. Thank you for that. Now, back when you were beginning to do at UIDA, when you're thinking about Aadhaar, you named it Aadhaar. I want to get into that. How did you understand the idea of selling, identity to a billion Indians? How did you build a sense for what needs to be done?
Yeah, I guess in some ways, Gaurav, the marketing education we got at IIM Ahmedabad helped. The professional training at PNG, one of the world's best marketeers, that helped. But nothing prepared me for the size and the challenge. Because in marketing, we are taught to uh, segment, target, and position, right? Here, there was precisely one segment of 1.25 billion people, all uh, within India. So, how do you, there's no segment there. And how do you reach out to 1.2 billion people who are so diverse linguistically, geographically, socially, culturally, religious, socio-economic? and in so many ways. So that was a it was complete unlearning and then relearning. But thankfully we had time because the technology was being built in parallel. So I engaged a group of young volunteers who joined and sent them to all corners of the country and read prodigiously on what is it that unites 1.2 billion Indians. What is it that I can lean on to create demand for this unique identity from 1.2 billion Indians? So that, and then I must have met more than 100 people, diverse experts, filmmakers, sociologists, economists, politicians, bureaucrats, academicians, marketeers, diverse bunch of people, mythologists, to really understand, so what is India about? And after 6 to 8 months, I realized that if there's anything that unites us across everything that uh, is distinct, it is the concept of dharma and karma. The concept that everything has a nature. Nothing is inherently good or bad. Everything has a nature. We worship snakes, even though they're venomous and they kill people, because you know there's a reason we do that. So inherent belief that everything has a nature, inherent belief that every action has a fruit which I may or may not get directly. As a parent, I might slog my whole life to make my child rich and successful, but I do it without a complaint, right? Because the fruits of my labor, I will get it maybe in my next life or whatever. So it is these concepts that allowed me to frame the value proposition and create the brand architecture of Aadhaar, which essentially is that it's a foundation, and that foundation gives you access to different possibilities, which in turn creates a level playing field for you. And also help that Aadhaar, as we did our research, is a word that exists in multiple Indian languages, north, east, south, west, and it's also easy to pronounce. So that's how a committee was set up, and we filtered through a bunch of options and then settled on Aadhaar.
Fantastic. I'm going to change tracks, Shankar, go back in time. Um, you know, we've talked about reaching a peak in your career. You know, you're at PNG, hugely successful, do a startup, sell it, hugely successful, and at 37, rich and retired. It would be enough for most people to stop. What urges you on, and why take on this? You know, at the peak, you're looking at something where all you can see is more darkness in the valley below. Why go forward? What's been the driver there?
Yeah. When I was in PNG, there was a project I did, which is to test the upper limit of media. It was called How High is High, right? So it was simple. Keep increasing media, see if that increases in greater sales. Some point it won't. So, you've reached the limit. I guess my philosophy is, are you sure you've reached your top, right? Have you reached your peak or have you reached the peak of the mountain? Two different things, right? The peak of the mountain is you being on top of the situation and the zone you are in, the context you are in, which very quickly becomes your comfort zone. But is that your peak? How do you know? You only know when you're prepared to let go of the peak of the mountain and push yourself to the next peak. Because again, finally, as professionals, what are we trying to do? Just see how good we are, right? Yeah, by the time you're 35, 40, you know how good you are because your context in the world tells you. But are you sure you have reached the peak of your potential? And that's something, that's a question that has been driving me even after I got rich and retired.
That's fascinating. So, Shankar, now as you're at PNG, going further back. I'm just going back in time now. PNG is obviously a very safe, very good, comforting corporate environment. How did you feel you changed from that time to doing your own startup? Were there any adjustments you had to make in who you were?
Yeah, I think definitely it was unnerving. You have gotten to the place that you wanted to, your dream job. You're doing the stuff that you love. And then one fine day you decide to walk away from it. I don't know if I got the chance again, would I advise my younger self to do it? But that's a different question. But the first, and as any entrepreneur would know, it takes you a couple of years to even settle down and realize what just happened. The change is disconcerting because, firstly, there is massive change, transformation. What you could take for granted is not there. Your first mistake as an entrepreneur could be your organization's last mistake. You might be doing great stuff, but consumers don't pay for it. Consumers might be paying for it, but you don't get funding, and the survival chances are 10%. So, the ability to roll up your sleeves and do whatever is needed is something you learn as an entrepreneur. Another thing is, as an entrepreneur, every 6 months, every 1 year, you have to keep growing. Because if you don't grow, the people around you, under you, they are not growing. And you cannot grow if you're not comfortable in unlearning and relearning. There's a job you're doing, say marketing or finance or business or technology or whatever. You become really good at it. At that point, if you don't hand it over to someone and do something bigger that creates more value for the organization, you are the guy on the Everest peak blocking others from getting to the peak because you have reached the peak, you're occupying it, and you've created traffic jam for others. So, comfort with change, unlearning and relearning as cycles. And the other thing, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly living a life of self delusion. You create this belief that this is possible. You sell that belief to customers, to funders, to employees, sometimes even to family, and therefore to yourself. And at some point, the boundary between belief and self delusion starts to become very, very, very thin. And one can get very schizophrenic, right? In the privacy of your thoughts, you are wondering, how the hell am I going to achieve it? But a minute later, when you meet an employee who is demotivated, you have to sell that larger dream and belief and all, right? So, but after some time, you get comfortable with it because, well, you have to learn to handle. So, yeah, it teaches a lot about life, entrepreneurship, and every change after that.
I found something you said just caught my attention. So make room at the top of the mountain. I was fascinated by it. See, as a startup founder, or as someone who's leading a foundation, are you feeling the pressure to climb up or away from this peak so you can let other people climb up? Is that what you're describing?
So, two things, Gaurav. One, if you don't climb further, you're blocking the path for others. Second, if you don't climb further, you have acknowledged that you have reached your peak. That's bad news for you. And you not climbing further is bad news for the people under you or even with you. So imagine if you have two, three co founders, The other two are rising, other two are climbing higher. Because you're scared, you're not rising higher. But one person confident of letting go of the branch and jumping on to the next branch gives others belief. And multiple times in my life, I've seen at close quarters power of belief.
Now, as you advise other entrepreneurs as a mentor to several, social and regular entrepreneurs, um, what are the sort of challenges that you see that you advise people on?
Yeah, another great question. The first is whatever we do, whatever we are, we work with certain mental models. We make certain assumptions of the world. And that gets reinforced when we work with the same kind of people again and again and again. So, in a sense, we're used to a certain jungle. So, when we meet people from other jungles, somebody in big tech meets someone in, say, sunset tech, the sunset industry. Someone from the for profit meets someone from the not for profit. These are all different worlds. When we meet people from a different world, either disagreeing with them or disbelieving that there is a separate world which has its own truth, its own ways of working and living, I've seen that as limiting. So, as a peak professional, you've become comfortable in a certain world. You have to let go of that world to, if you reach the top of that world, to go into other world. There you'll find different people, working with them, leveraging differences, being empathetic that there are people who are completely different from you. But when you understand and collaborate and work with them, the results can be far greater than even if you take everybody from your world and work on the task. So, appreciating and leveraging diversity. And the point was brought home to me by one of my employees at Marketics, who was actually an agriculture scientist, who was looking at the kind of diversity at Marketics and said that, you know what, it's a diverse forest that is resilient to changes. And that remark stayed with me till now after 20 years. A plantation or a forest that has the same kind of trees is very fragile, but it's diversity that brings resilience, that allows progress, that allows innovation. So, being friendly with change, being friendly with unlearning, relearning, and diversity, meeting people from other worlds makes this happen, and creating a larger destination which brings in people from other worlds again is the start of the process for me.
Now, this drive for diversity, I appreciate that. One of the examples that comes in is the Irish potato famine, where if you have a monoculture of potatoes, then if there's some sort of rot, the entire crop goes, and there's famine in the society. I appreciate that, but as someone who works in the professional world, do you how do you encourage people to take in diversities and create it's harder work to hire people that are not like yourself, right? How do you create a team out of that?
Yeah. At Extra, we practice what we call as plus one design, which is radical change is not that easily doable or sustainable at scale or even at an individual level unless it is broken down into a series of incremental steps. Each incremental step producing irreversible change, each incremental step itself has a transformational impact. So, when I talk of diversity, it's not going from 0 to 100 in one step, but gradually increasing your discomfort threshold. gradually increasing the skills of being able to rise above differences, of being able to see beyond the deficiencies of the other, of being able to sense the collaborative potential of and of being able to create spaces where you can get people together and gradually increase the diversity of it. And sometimes it may not be possible to have very diverse people in one space. So creating three or four spaces, each similar in one way, but still with diversity, is another way that I've found. So instead of putting all kinds of people together, it's a sense of purpose. Finally, how is collaboration different from cooperation or coordination, which is what the for-profit world teaches us? Collaboration is shared creation. Collaboration is about co-creation. So it's not about how do I get on with diverse people. It is how do I co-create with diverse people. That means they bring in skills and resources which I don't have, right? And it therefore goes back to uh, stronger together, like the African proverb says. If you want to travel fast, travel alone. But if you want to travel far, travel together. And any journey of 1,000 miles, you're better off traveling with a group of people and diverse, so that at relevant points, the diversity becomes a strength.
Now, a lot of us, at least mid-career people, you begin to think about, all right, I've reached this career peak. Later in life than you, but somewhere in the 40s, 50s, people want to do things for the society, because we're not feeling complete, or we think we have a lot more to give than we're giving. How would you encourage people to look at the social sector? I have two questions here. One, you did a obviously a very successful corporate stint, and then you get into something that involves state governments, the government, bureaucracy, a whole bunch of different types of people that you've not worked with. Uh, how is that experience? That's question number one. And question number two, as someone who wants to do something on the social side, is there a graded step that you recommend people look at, or you've seen work for other people?
Yeah. So few things. I think the notion that people have reached a peak and now they want to give back itself is a fallacy. I would encourage people that you've reached a peak. Now you want to get more from the world. And the way of getting more from the world is by giving more, by serving. Serve has a different connotation than give. Because when you're giving back, you're assuming that what you're giving is of value to society. When you're giving back, you want appreciation of that giving back. And I've seen in both of these, the value of the giving or an appreciation, professionals get disappointed. Because I was a peak professional in one world, in the other world, I'm a volunteer. In other world, this is very inefficient. In another world, nobody's setting detailed project plans, right? Because you're comparing this world to your world, right? But so the first is appreciating that this is a different world. I like to think of it as a different life. Yeah, you take some skills and resources from the past, but just like somebody finishes college, tops college, walks into corporate, well, they're pretty much starting at the bottom, right? At that point, if the person says, "Hey, I was a topper in class, I was the senior most in my college," the corporate world would look at, "Okay, kid, get a life, move on," right? So it's not exactly the same, but it's something similar. Nobody will value what you have done until you create value for them in that world. And it's a lot of disappointment That me as a CEO, CXO came down from the heaven to serve the masses. I'm not being appreciated. I'll go back to my heaven. Right? Nobody gives a damn. People have enough problems to worry about than to add to the problem of appreciating the work you have done. If you do it, it'll take time, it'll take months, it'll take years, and ultimately you will not even get any reward. And therefore, the reward has to be the work you have done. Like going back to karma, you're entitled only to the action and not to the fruits of your action. Excuse me. So that's why I counsel those who are jumping into the development sector, or for that matter, any new thing, from a manager to a professional, sorry, from a manager to an entrepreneur, from uh, venture capitalist to an entrepreneur, venture capitalist to a philanthropist. Any big changes, you have to go through the discomfort and unlearning and then relearning. It doesn't mean you forget everything, but prepare to get uncomfortable. And beyond a point, our relationship with change rapidly goes south. We get very comfortable with stability.
Sometime earlier, Shankar, you talked about the Ouroboros, right? The snake eating its own tail to shed its skin. How have you've been through this molting process repeatedly? Um, at what point do you feel the urge to do something different? When do you feel it?
One signal is when you're getting too comfortable, when things are becoming too predictable, and you can see the next 3 months, 6 months, and it's more of the same, more of the past 3 months, 6 months. That to me the first indication that, well, that gives me discomfort, because then you're starting to wonder, what am I not seeing? What is around the corner that I'm seeing as a straight road? Where does the road turn and something is coming at me? So that's one thing. Second, I personally have a very comfortable relationship with change, possibly because of my growing up, and I've seen change work for me. But not all the colleagues I work with have that. Everybody's tolerance with change is not the same, right? So converting the change that I see is needed. Yeah, of course, the missing step is, if I'm uncomfortable, analyzing and reflecting what is making me uncomfortable, what could be coming around, starting to talk to people, starting to reflect, starting to look at what is not working, what could go wrong, trigger a hypothesis, and again, get out of a comfort zone by talking to diverse people. That always works. But having realized that it's time to change, with the benefit of gray hairs, I now realize that it's important to convert that change into a series of plus ones, both for myself and for others. And typically, what I think is a change that should happen in 3 months typically ends up happening anywhere from 6 months to a year. So you have a sense of, the mind might be thinking faster than the organization can move.
Fantastic. Shankar, as a multi peak professional, I really appreciated this conversation. I took a lot of notes, even from this conversation, not just our preparatory conversation. So thank you for taking your time out for sharing with us. And I look forward to more of your peaks in the future.
Thank you, Gaurav. Great speaking to you. You really puts me into reflecting quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And everybody else, have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye.